I recently turned 40, and for my 40th birthday I was able to go to New York, and I was lucky enough to see Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden. And so this video is going to be a little vlog really about that experience and how I felt about it. So please enjoy. Hey YouTube, I'm going to start by showing you my birthday balloon that my parents bought me on my birthday on the 5th of July. This is a Star Wars balloon, and what you can see is it's a balloon in a balloon, and you've got the Death Star inside of this Star Wars balloon. It's so awesome. And a month later it's still going strong. So absolutely fantastic little birthday present for my mum and dad. I'm just going to put it down here by the side of the video so it doesn't sort of distract us, but I thought I'd have it in the video because it's such a special part of my 40th birthday. Yeah, I wanted to talk today about going to New York for the very first time and going to see one of my favourite artists, Billy Joel, at Madison Square Garden, which actually is kind of a dream come true in many respects. Because leading up to turning 40, I was feeling a bit sort of odd about it. Wasn't really looking forward to turning 40. I didn't think it was a good thing necessarily. It was sort of a marker to say that I'm getting older, which is a bit of a scary thing. Oh, I'm getting attacked by the balloon. Obviously that's God telling me that I shouldn't be scared about getting older. I'm going to put it behind me, right. But you know, as the birthday got closer, it was like, what are we going to do? And we were sort of talking about things, and something that I always wanted to do. I remember I suppose it stems really from liking Billy Joel because he's a very New York artist, and all of a lot of the lyrics to his songs are references to New York and specific places in New York. Summer Highland Falls, I'm going to do a video, hopefully link to it at some point. It's a great song that he wrote, really underrated song. It's about a place just outside of New York called Summer Highland Falls. New York State of Mind, of course, he's talking about going down the River Hudson, and he's talking about being in Chinatown, Big Man on Mulberry Street, scenes from an Italian restaurant. These are all songs that are about New York or are inspired by this amazing city that I'd seen on television, I'd seen in movies growing up. You know, Ghostbusters is all filmed around New York. So many movies you could reel off. The Marathon Man is a great thriller that was filmed all around New York. It's just culturally a really interesting place for me when I was 15 because I was so immersed in American culture, I suppose. I loved David Letterman, I'd watch it every night, and I'd dream about going to New York, and I'd never been. So turning 40, we were sort of talking about what I'd do, and one of the ideas was, well, should we go to New York? Because I've always wanted to go. It's like, yeah, this would be amazing. And then, of course, being a huge Billy fan, I know that every month, as of at the moment, 2019, Billy Joel does a show at Madison Square Garden, one show a month, and it's like a residency. And he's now done over 100 shows at the Garden. This residency has been going on since 2013. And so the idea is we should go to New York and see everything in New York that we can, but then cherry on the cake, we get tickets to go and see Billy's show at Madison Square Garden in July 2019. So we look online and the show's on the 11th of July. I think that's pretty close to my birthday. I've got the time off work. Brilliant. So we book the holiday and we also book Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden. And the show happened, as of the date of filming this video, probably approaching a month ago. And the memories of this show have just been ruminating in my head because it was such an amazing and magical experience. And I thought, for my next video, I'm going to have to come online, I'm going to have to come on the channel, and I'm going to have to talk about this gig and this experience of seeing one of my idols and, you know, one of my favourite artists of all time in this iconic venue that just happens to be in his home city. Billy's from Long Island in New York, and I think he lives on Long Island even now, which probably makes the commute for doing the show very easy. And so I wanted to talk about the trip. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. The actual trip itself was even more exciting than I expected it to be, because when we get to New York, what I don't realise is that the hotel that we've booked is directly opposite the garden. The hotel is called the New Yorker, and it was the hotel that Muhammad Ali used to stay in. And so we pull up, and with like the transfer, and I look, and there's Madison Square Garden. I'm like, wow, there's the garden. And I look over, and there's the hotel we're staying in. It was just an unbelievably cool experience. And on the morning of the show, we decided that we would get these passes. It's an all-access tour pass to Madison Square Garden. These tours run every half an hour at the garden, I think 7 days a week. And so on the morning of the show, we thought we'll go on the tour, and at very least we'll see like something going on sort of backstage for the show that night. And it was really treated with this tour, because when we are taken into the garden, we're then taken into the sort of the public area, and as we go in, I'm holding my pass. I'll put a photo up now, but they're actually building the stage, and so Billy's piano's now gone on the stage. The stage at this point is in the middle of the auditorium. It's eventually pushed back. The show was in the round, but it was eventually pushed back. But to see the crew putting the stage together was just such a cool experience, and I would highly recommend going on one of the Madison Square Garden all access tours, especially if you've got an event at the garden that you're going to see, because go on the day of the event, and who knows what you might see. I think if we'd gone a bit later on in the afternoon, who knows, you might even have heard or seen some of the sound check. We didn't see that, unfortunately, but it was still a really cool experience. But Madison Square Garden is such an iconic place as well. To go on one of these tours, it's just awesome. You find out all about the history of the venue, the fact that the Madison Square Garden that's there now is not the original Madison Square Garden. Originally it was in Madison Park, which is a few blocks over from West 33rd and 34th Street, where the garden is today. But you get to hear all about the history of the garden, and how back in the day, very, very famous boxing matches essentially took place at the garden, and that's how it became famous. And as you walk around Madison Concourse, where they sell all the beverages and the food, you'll see all different plaques up from various events that have happened in the past. But one of the main sporting events in the 60s was, the boxing match, the first boxing match between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. And so they've got, a whole blurb about the match, and they've got Muhammad Ali's boxing glove. And when you go on the backstage tour, you get given all this information about the venue, almost too much to take in at one go. And then they take you all around the concourse, they take you into the actual arena itself, and they show you the staging, and they talk about the acoustics of the venue, which I'll come on to that in a minute. They're absolutely stellar. The acoustics are fantastic in that venue. But the venue's used obviously for New York Knicks basketball games, it's used for hockey, ice hockey, and it's used for sporting events and concerts. When you look up at the ceiling, you'll see like this, it's like a basketball. The ceiling is almost like a basketball. And one of the really cool things about it is all the chairs that are sort of go round the venue of the arena. I don't know how they're supported, but they're on like steel girders that actually move. So when you stand up and people are cheering, the whole floor of Madison Square Garden basically moves. It's just an incredible place to go and see a show, or to go and see, I imagine, I didn't see a sporting event, but if you went to see a sporting event, I imagine that the atmosphere would be absolutely electric. And it's unlike any venue I've ever been to before in my life. But it was just a fantastic, fantastic thing. So if you get a chance, go on the all-access tour at Madison Square Garden, because it's great. You always get this virtual reality thing at the end, where everyone puts on a headset. You take them backstage. You can see the New York Knicks changing room, and you see the ice hockey guys changing room as well. And then you are given this virtual reality tour, whereby everyone's told to put on a headset and some headphones. And you look around the headset. Oh, my garage door's about to bang. You look around on the headset, and it's like being actually in the venue, but up high. And you can turn around, and like you actually feel like you're there. And there's like on this footage, there's like a ice hockey game going on. Then they show a bit of basketball, and then they show a bit of a Billy Joel concert, because Billy Joel is there, as I say, every month. So that was the morning of the show. So we go to this thing, we see all this backstage stuff. It was absolutely fantastic. And then we went and we did the Radio City Music Hall tour. and the Churches, a band called the Churches, were on at Radio City on the 11th of July this year. And we did see their sound check. So when we went through Radio City Music Hall, they were on the stage sound checking. So I got to see the Churches as well as a bit of a bonus, which was really cool. And then we went back to the hotel. We got changed and we went to the show. We went to a diner first, and we had like a proper American sort of meal. I had like steak and eggs and this sort of potato stuff that was all chopped up, which was really cool. And then we went across to Madison Square Garden. Before we went into the venue, I saw this guy selling t-shirts, and so I had to get myself a tour t-shirt, which I'm wearing for this video. And I also wore this hat, this New York Yankees hat, all sort of around New York for the whole holiday pretty much. But this t-shirt I bought outside of Madison Square Garden from this sort of dodgy vendor. But you know, I can't justify buying like the merchandise inside these venues, and particularly in New York where everything is expensive. The merchandising was so expensive. I mean, like the t-shirts and the hoodies were $40, $50, $60. There were vinyl records of The Stranger that were selling for like $30. It was so expensive. So this was like $10 outside, which was absolutely, I thought, a bargain, absolute bargain. And I got to wear my Billy Joel t-shirt for the show. But we go into the venue, and the security in the venue is really high, and everybody was standing around for about half an hour while the police come in, and we're thinking, what's going on? What is happening? And it turns out that night, Bill and Hillary Clinton were at the show, and the reason we couldn't get in quicker than we did is because the police escort were making sure that they were brought into the building safely first. I'll come on to what happened with Bill and Hillary Clinton later on, because that's a bit of a story in itself. But we go into the venue and we walk around the Madison Concourse that we'd already seen, but now of course it's really busy, the vendors are in there, there are, you know, thousands of people all walking around. But if you go to Madison Square Garden, make sure you walk around the concourse, because if you walk all 360 degrees around it, at the top you see pictures of iconic concerts that have taken place in the past. And there are, like, you know, the date of the concert together with the artist and the significance of that particular show. And they're really significant shows that are up there. So, I mean, an exciting one for me, I want to look at because each month is represented as you walk around. I'm go straight to July because that's the month of my birthday. And in 1984, there's a picture of Billy Joel on the 5th of July playing on my birthday when I was 5 years old at Madison Square Garden, which was a real treat to sort of see that. And then as you walk around, you see artists like Paul McCartney, various shows he had. There's the show for 9/11, of course, that took place. That's represented. I saw Michael Jackson in 1988 on the Bad Tour, and his 1988 Madison Square Garden show was represented on Madison Concourse. There were shows by the Rolling Stones, of course, iconic shows by the Rolling Stones. There's a picture of the first time Elton John ever played the Garden up there with the date of the show. And then, of course, you've got things like pictures of the last time that John Lennon played live. Because of course he was killed in 1980 in New York, but that was in the 70s. I think it was 1974 or 1976, and you've got the picture of him. Oh, there's a plane above me. You've got the picture of him playing his last show with Elton John. I'm sure everybody knows the story about that. He played on Elton John's record. He said, if this record goes to #1, then I'll come and play live with you, because John Lennon had a horrible stage fright. And Elton John's record that he played on went to #1, and so he came out and played at Madison Square Garden on that night in the 70s, and it's represented. We've also got a lot of the Springsteen shows that are sort of represented around the concourse, and shows by people like Tina Turner and Madonna and Sting. Oh, just you know, a who's who of artists, really. And as you go around the concourse and you look at all these pictures, you really realise the history of the place. It's sort of similar in many respects to going to the Royal Albert Hall, because when you go to the Royal Albert Hall in London, as you walk around their concourse, they have lovely framed pictures of old shows and of iconic events that have taken place at the Royal Albert Hall. So it's a sort of a similar thing, but if you go to the Garden, you see a show or an event there, make sure you sort of walk around the concourse before you go into the show, and give yourself enough time to walk around and look at these, you know, really great kind of pictures. Also got, of course, the show I really wanted to go to was the Millennium Show that Billy did at the Garden. There's a CD out of that, and I remember getting that CD in 2000 and just listening to it and pretending that I was there at the Garden seeing Billy Joel. And it's kind of why this was so significant for my birthday, because it was so important to me, and it was such a culturally important thing to me growing up, that to hit a milestone like 40 and to get to do this was just phenomenal. So anyway, we go into the venue, and the tickets that we've got were just phenomenal. You couldn't have asked for better tickets. The show was in the round. For those of you that have been to see Billy at the Garden, you'll notice the show was in the round. And so we were behind the stage, and you were in striking distance. I was as close to Billy as I am to my house now, sitting in my garden. And I was like, we sat down, I was like, wow, these are really, really good tickets that we've got. This is not kind of at the back of the Garden. Although on the walk around earlier on, I'd been at the back of the Garden, and to be honest with you, although it's like a 20,000 seat venue, I don't think there was a bad seat in the house. And the woman that gave us the tour had talked about the acoustics of the venue and how it had been specially treated and how good the sound would be that night at the show. But man, when Billy came out, that crowd went absolutely wild. I mean, these are people that have travelled from all over the world to see Billy, so they're huge fans. Everybody there kind of knew his songs really, really well. And the scream that went out when he came out, I can feel it now, it was like electricity. And that enthusiasm sort of did not abate throughout the entirety of the whole show. And the crowd was, I mean, there were older people at the crowd, because, I mean, I was talking about Billy playing the Garden when I'm 5 years old in 1984. Well, he'd been going for 10 years before that. So he's accrued all these fans over the years, certainly in America and in Australia, I think, where he's really, really popular. And so you've got all these different age groups, and older people, there were people my age, there were people a lot younger than me, a lot of college people. We were sort of sitting next to this college pair, and there were these college guys in front of us as well. So I mean, it was a young crowd, it was an old crowd, it was an enthusiastic crowd, hugely enthusiastic. I mean, it was a New York crowd, I suppose. I think that's probably the difference. The New Yorkers are not shy about telling you how they feel, and they were really happy to see him, as was I, of course. But he came out and he played the first few notes of A Matter of Trust. And I just thought, my God, the sound, because he's always got great sound. The sound guy he's got with him, I think, is called Brian Ruggles. And Brian Ruggles has been with Billy Joel since like the early 70s. And when I first saw Billy Joel live, the thing that struck me was the power and clarity of the sound. But in Madison Square Garden, the clarity of the sound is even better. I mean, I could hear every single part of the musical spectrum so clearly. And everything had bite to it as well. So you could hear all the bass notes, the bass kick of the drum, the bass guitar. You could hear all the backing singers properly stacked on each other. You could hear the guitars and the piano. You could hear absolutely everything. It's crystal clear. And I think that's partly to do with the quality of the sound engineering, because he always sounds good. But it was better than I've seen him in the past, much better. So I think it was partly to do with the quality of the sound engineering, but also partly to do with the acoustics of the venue, which is another huge reason to go and see Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden as part of this residency. So I'm talking about the crowd. I mean, the crowd that are there, they are there. Everyone wants to be there, obviously. The ticket prices weren't that cheap. They weren't massively expensive, but they weren't cheap. And just the sheer enthusiasm of the crowd was fantastic. And my wife's not a huge Billy Joel fan, but I think even she was like, this is really cool, this is really great, the music sounds great. She knows most of the songs from me playing them, and everybody in the audience was just stoked to be there, and I mean completely stoked to be there. Now moving on to probably Billy's set list, because the thing about Billy is, and I'd probably criticise him a bit for now, having seen lots of other artists, and it's partly because he hasn't released any new music in a long time. But when you see Billy, he tends to play the same songs, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because you don't want to go to see an established artist and then have them play a whole new set of material, really, especially not in a venue like that. You want to see the artist play the classic songs, and Billy always plays the classic songs. But there was a stage in his career where I was seeing his shows, and I sort of felt that he was almost painting by numbers a little bit. wasn't putting quite as much enthusiasm into the performances that I'd previously seen him put in. But man, on the 11th of July 2019 at Madison Square Garden, that man is 70 years old, and he put in 110%. Every song he sang with passion. Every note he played, you could almost hear him about to break the piano strings on some of the tracks. It was just visceral energy. It was fantastic. Really special. Moving on to the set list. The set list was really interesting because when he came out, he played A Matter of Trust, which is, it's a good song. It's not one of my favourite songs, it's a good song. But then he started playing these album cuts. So he plays Summer Highland Falls. And I'm like, one of my favourite songs of his. I'm going to try and do a cover version, which I'll link to hopefully at some point when it's ready to go up online. But it's such a great song. And it hits me, something that James Griffiths had said to me when I'd first said to James, listen to The Stranger. And he listened to The Stranger and he went, this album sounds so New York. And it clicked, everything sort of clicked. When I listened to it, I'm going, yeah, Summer Highland Falls is named after a place in upstate New York. He then plays New York State of Mind. And he's talking about being on Riverside or in Chinatown. And I'm thinking, man, I'm so lucky to be here for my birthday because we've just taken a cruise down the Hudson River and we've seen where the Titanic would have docked and we've seen Battery Park and we were in Chinatown last night. He then sings Big Man on Mulberry Street. And the night before, we had been on Mulberry Street in Little Italy eating Italian food. And of course, he then goes on to play scenes from an Italian restaurant, which, is like a conglomerate of, it's almost like a painting of different restaurants up and down Little Italy, and particularly, I guess, on Mulberry Street. So I'm listening to these songs in New York. I'm seeing my favourite artist of all time, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've died and gone to heaven. And I now not only love the music, but I'm understanding the geography of the music, and I'm understanding where the music and lyrically where the music comes from, which gives me a whole new appreciation of his music. And listening to that in New York with a New York crowd and having such good tickets was just phenomenal. And I just been thinking about it more and more and more, and thinking about what a great time it was, and how I always thought I would never beat seeing Billy for the first time because I was 14 years old, I was impressionable, I hadn't really heard live music of that calibre in the past. But I tell you what, seeing him in Madison Square Garden in July this year, it came blinking close, if not actually beating that first time. I don't think I will ever see Billy as good as I saw him the other day. The only thing that would have made that show slightly better would have been for him to have Liberty DeVito on drums. Because the band he's got are very good and they produced an amazing sound. And I don't want to talk bad about his new drummer, Chuck Birdie, because he's a really good drummer. He kept really good time. He had a real solid beat behind the tracks. And he sounds different from Liberty DeVito. But Liberty DeVito played on the original albums. He is a showman drummer. His fills are so exciting. He's a drummer really unlike any other drummer that I know. And so while Chuck Birdie did a fantastic job, and I loved the show, and I don't want to take away from Chuck's playing at all, the show would have probably been slightly better with the original band makeup. And of course, for those of you that follow Billy will know that the original band, Russell Jarvis, Richie Canata and Liberty DeVito play in basically a Billy Joel covers band in New York now called the Lords of 52nd Street. And it's kind of a shame that they're playing the covers band because they should really be playing with Billy at this residency in Madison Square Garden. And, Billy, or any of Billy's people, if you ever see this video, please get those guys back and have them on stage with you, because it would make the show, it would just take it from being amazing to being completely out of this world. Now, part of the reason I say Billy was really putting in all that effort was because Bill and Hillary Clinton were there. So about halfway through the show, he announces that his good friends Bill and Hillary are in the auditorium tonight, and the New York crowd go ballistic, and I mean they are not holding back at all. Half the crowd are cheering. Me and Sarah are sort of being really polite. We're kind of, well, that's nice that they're here. Very British. But the American element of the crowd, half of them are cheering, and half, I would say to 3/4, start booing really loudly. There's a clip of it on YouTube. You check it out. Billy Joel, Madison Square Garden, the 11th of July, Bill Clinton. Go and check it out. You can hear this huge kind of boo that comes all across the auditorium, which kind of shocked me a little bit. I mean, I know maybe like Bill Clinton and Hillary are a bit like Margaret Thatcher here from the 80s, where people either loved Margaret Thatcher or they hated her. But the reaction of the crowd was really, really special. And of course, we're just behind the stage, so we're not far away from Billy. And I was kind of looking around. It was like a Where's Wally moment. Can I see Bill and Hillary in the crowd? And I looked down, and they are sort of, as I'm looking at the stage, they're to the left side of the stage by the exits. Just like in the crowd, basically, but at the side of the crowd. So I like point down to my wife. I say, there he is. And we look at him. We took a picture of Bill and Hillary. Had to zoom in slightly, but I mean, we were close enough that we could see them. So that was just, again, something else that was really magical about the night. You sort of look back and you think, it was like a dream. You know, I used to dream about seeing Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden, and here I am in New York, seeing all these amazing places, and I've gone to Madison Square Garden, and Bill and Hillary Clinton are there. And it's just like, this isn't real. This can't be real. But it actually was real, and it really, really happened. And it's just so exciting. And it's partly why I wanted to come on and talk about this today on YouTube. The other thing as well is talking about the old members of the band that are still with Billy. There are two members particularly that make the evening special and still put in 110%. I've got to mention Crystal Taliaferro. I mean, she plays everything, you know, she's there playing harmonica and saxophone and percussion instruments, and she's got this voice that would cut glass, you know, and as I say, in the mix, you can hear her voice just cutting through the mix, and she's doing these backing vocals. Absolutely fantastic. Mark Rivera, showman, he's been with Billy since the 80s, probably played when I was 5 years old at that show at Madison Square Garden. I don't know that for a fact, but I know he's on the Innocent Man album, so he has to have been sort of in Billy's band around that point. And he's there, you know, and he's like as enthusiastic as he ever was. If you watch the Live at Yankee Stadium concert video, Crystal and him are really, really enthusiastic. That's from 1990. And all these years later, they're still putting in as much effort as they did back then. Fantastic, really great players. Talk about Mike Del Goose. Mike Del Goose, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I might be slightly wrong about that. He's like a newer member of the band. He did a Billy Joel tribute, from what I can gather, in New York, and somehow I think Tommy Burns, the guitarist, finds out about this guy and he brings him in. And I saw him play with Billy at Hammersmith in 2013, the Hammersmith Odeon, which was a really small, intimate venue, which was a good gig. Not as good as this, but it was a good gig. It was a much more polite gig with an older audience. This was balls to the wall stuff. But I didn't really understand why he was in the band, to be honest with you. I thought, well, what purpose is he really serving? Then I realised, actually, I think his purpose is that he does these great backing vocals because he sings Nessun Dorma before Billy goes into Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, and Billy plays like classical piano against Nessun Dorma as a lead into Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. And he was great. He was absolutely great doing that. So I kind of get why he's there. It's more about vocals, I think, than anything else. And you talk about the set list. I mean, Billy was just having an absolute riot. The whole band was just having a riot. You know, it's a July in New York City. It's really, really hot and sticky and sort of sweaty. And so, you know, a few tracks in, Billy plays that song, Hot Time Summer in the City. You had Nessun Dorma thrown in there. You had all kinds of tracks that aren't Billy tracks. Just the band were just bashing them out. And they were just a band that were absolutely bloody rocking. Fantastic. I mean, they were just great. They were just absolutely great. And so the show finishes. It felt like it was on for about 10 minutes, but it was a 2.5 hour show. The set list, as I say, included all the hits. Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, We Didn't Start the Fire. He played everything really that I wanted to play, but maybe Angry Young Man and Miami 2017, he didn't play those tracks. But he made up for that because he played these album cuts, as I say, like Big Man on Mulberry Street. He played Summer Highland Falls, which was just a dream come true. I've never seen him play Summer Highland Falls live before. He played the Downeaster Alexa. Just a great night, a great set list. And when it was over, you know, he went. Christy Brinkley was there as well. We saw her sort of milling around the stage before the show started, which is nice that she still comes to his shows. I think that's really great. And it was just a magical evening. You know, the show finished and we filed out of Madison Square Garden. I was on a high. I'm still wearing my T-shirt, my New York Yankees cap, the ones that I'm wearing now. And we went to McDonald's and got a big gulp cup. We had something to drink, and then we went back to the hotel, and loads of people at the hotel, of course, had been to the show, wearing T-shirts and stuff. We were sort of talking about the show, going up to the lift. We went to the room, and the next day we had more adventures in New York. But it was just such a special show, and the residency that he's doing at Madison Square Garden, it is special because it's not like seeing him at Wembley or seeing him at the NEC in Birmingham or seeing him really anywhere else. It's seeing Billy in his hometown at this iconic, amazing venue. And you can say, if you get the all access pass before a show, or if you're going to see another artist there, get the all access pass. It's well worth walking around and having that experience, and it just adds the extra specialness to the day. Seeing the Clintons, it was just amazing. And so I'm going to finish the video by showing you a clip from my life. And I don't know if the excitement will come across in the video, but there was just the excitement in the room was great because he played A Matter of Trust, and then he went into this track, My Life, and everybody was just going absolutely wild around us. And you didn't really sit down much during the gig because it was just balls to the wall, great playing, great music. So without further ado, I've waffled on enough. This is My Life, Billy Joel at the Garden from the 11th of July 2019. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.